Good afternoon then, Year 5, and welcome to today's English lesson. Now, I'd just like to begin with a little apology. The book that we were looking at yesterday, as I mentioned in our live lesson, was the Alex Rider Stormbreaker book. Okay, and that first sentence that I showed you was from that book. Now, I heard that you've already done the book, unfortunately, in Year 4, so I thought I'd have to swap it around, so we are going to start again. So yesterday's lesson was a little bit irrelevant in the sense that we didn't need to focus on that book, but the work you did, I'm sure, was excellent. So we are moving on then to a different book then today, which is what we're going to be talking about, and we'll be looking at this book that I've chosen up until the Easter holidays. So what we're going to do first of all, before I show you this book and tell you what book we're going to be doing, we're going to have a look a little bit at clocks. Okay, now I think this is really weird. This is an English lesson. Why are we talking about clocks? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to show you a list of all these different clocks. So we've got a wristwatch, digital clock, analog clock, church clock, a clock in the car, a radio clock, a pendulum clock. So that's one that kind of like swings. You've got a musical clock, so a clock that plays like music, and your Roman numerals clock. Okay, there's loads of different clocks. There are more clocks than this as well. These are just some examples. And why I wanted to focus on all of these different kind of clocks is show that all of these clocks all have different ways of working, and yet every single one of them, although they're slightly different in the way that they work, each of them is made up of small, intricate little parts that work together in order to create something brilliant. Okay, in order for the clock to work, everything has to be perfect, have to be working together in time. One cog might push another cog, which then pushes another cog to get everything ticking, and then once it all starts, it never stops. It just keeps on ticking round in perfect motion. Okay, so it doesn't matter which kind of clock it does, how it does it, everything is under perfect kind of control. It's set up perfectly so that it works. Okay, so here's an example quickly of just a little clock here. So you've this is like the inside of like a little pocket watch. Okay, so you've got all these cogs, look, which then tick round in circles, and they all tick together. They combine with each other, all to make the hands on the clock move. Okay, and create the time. Okay, so there's all these different kind of events that happens. Now the reason we've looked at clocks there and just introduced what clocks are all about a little bit is because we're going to be looking at this book over the next half term. And so it's called Clockwork by Philip Pullman. Okay, so Clockwork or All Wound Up. This is the book we're going to be looking at. And as we begin here, we're going to start by me reading the preface of this book. So I'm going to read through this for you now, so just listen and read along with me. In the old days, when the story took place, time used to run by clockwork. Real clockwork, I mean, springs and cogwheels and gears and pendulums and so on. When you took it apart, you could see how it worked and how to put it together again. Nowadays, time runs by electricity and vibrating crystals or quartz and goodness knows what else. You can even buy a watch that's powered by a solar panel, and it sets itself several times a day by picking up a radio signal and never runs a second late. Clocks and watches like that might as well work by witchcraft for all the sense I can make of them. Real clockwork is quite mysterious enough. Take a spring, for instance, like the main spring of an alarm clock. It's made of tempered steel with an edge that's sharp enough to draw blood. If you play about with it carelessly, it will spring up and strike you like a snake and put out your eye. Or take a weight, the kind of iron weight that drives the mighty clocks that they have in church towers. If your head were under that weight, and if the weight fell, it would dash out your brains on the floor. But with the help of a few gears and pins and a little balance wheel oscillating to and fro, or a pendulum swinging from side to side, the strength of the spring and the power of the weight are led harmlessly through the clock to drive the hands. And once you've wound up a clock, there's something frightful in the way it keeps on going at its own relentless pace. Its hands move steadily round the dial as if they had a mind of their own. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Bit by bit, they move and tick as steadily on towards the grave. Some stories are like that. Once you've wound them up, nothing will stop them. They move on forwards till they have reached their destined end, and no matter how much the characters would like to change their fate, they can't. This is one of those stories. And now that it's all wound up, we can begin. Okay, so that is the preface then of the story that we are going to be reading. So Clockwork or All Wound Up. So what is the meaning of a preface? I want to talk to you actually what a preface was first of all. So if you don't know what a preface is, have a little focus on this sentence. This is the last sentence in this preface. So it says, this is one of those stories, and now it's all wound up, we can begin. So this is in the preface, and I'm going to focus on this bit here where it says, and now it is all wound up, okay? So what your preface does is actually almost like a clock. It winds itself up before it begins, before it starts ticking. You need to put all those pieces in place before it starts ticking. So a preface then, just from that, shows that it's introducing the story and giving the story some background. Okay, so we know it's talking about clocks and the kind of weird things that go on about them. Okay, it is winding up the story. So that is what your preface does. It introduces everything, winds up your story, and then as soon as your preface is done, it's wound up your clock, and then you let it go. You let it begin. The story just goes on and on. Okay, and there's all these different events that happens. So what your task is today, it might be a little bit similar to yesterday, and I do apologise for that. I didn't realise that you'd already done that Stormbreaker book before. So what I want you to do today, and this sentence will help you to answer those questions if you can. So I want you to think, do you think you will enjoy this story? Okay, and why do you think you might enjoy the story? What is it that tells you that you might enjoy it from the preface? What genre do you think it is, or what type of book do you think it is? And what sorts of things might the story be about? So using the preface, so feel free to rewind this video, look at all the pages that are in the book, that are in that preface, okay, reread it if you like, focus on this final couple of sentences as well if you want to, and tell me, do you think you enjoy the story? What genre, or so what type of book do you think it is, and what do you think the story might be about? And then tell me why you think these things. That's a really important bit. So don't just say, yes, I will enjoy the story, I think this is a comedy, I think the book's about clocks. I want you to tell me why, okay? Add some information as to why you think these things, okay? Use the preface, retrieve information from the preface to give you some information as to why you think these things when you're answering these questions. Okay, get on with that now for me. And what I wanted to end today's video with is just a quote from the author talking about this book. So, Philip Pullman has written, "This took a lot of working out. I was looking at one of the old clocks in the Science Museum in London one day, and I thought it would be fun to try and write a story in which one part turning this way connected to another part and made it turn that way, like the cogwheels of a clock. And when it was all fitted closely together, I could wind it up and set it going. Of course, it had to be spooky too, because all old clocks are somehow." Okay, so that is how Philip Pullman, the author of this book, got his inspiration to write this book, okay? And it's even mentioned there, after that ellipsis, it says, of course it had to be spooky too, so we know we're in for a little bit of a spooky book, okay? So that might help you when you're talking about what genre it is and what kind of things you think might happen in the story. Okay, so get on with that then, Year 5. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you later for our live lesson.